Well, I mean, addiction's hard in general, right? So if we can't kind of laugh at our addiction, if I can't laugh at my addiction, then it's just holding too much over me. So I feel like comedy nights, the arts are unique ways to bring people in that have a way to kind of blend tragedy but also triumph together. And I think comedy is a great way to do that.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hirsch Redpoon, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. My guest today on Truth Tastes Funny is Rob Lohman. Rob understands that truth can taste funny sometimes. He also understands it could be tragic, challenging. You can lose your way. All of these things, I think, are things that Rob experienced. From the pits of addiction to successes as an entrepreneur. Writing some books, including the addiction intervention book, which I am currently reading. He sent it to me so kindly, and we're going to dive into that. He also created ChristianRehabServices.com, and we will kind of dive into his story. And I know a little bit about it, but I don't want to give too much away. I want to let Rob kind of share with us today, but I also have some tough questions for him, and hopefully that'll be good. And welcome and welcome to Truth Tastes Funny, Rob. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, I welcome the tough questions. That's what life's all about, is being willing to answer and just being a transparent person in my life. So yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you. One of the things was I wanted to call attention to this because it really spoke to me. So this is if for those of you who are on YouTube, the addiction intervention book, and I haven't even gotten into like the strategies yet. I was just reading a lot of the introductory stuff. And one of the things I wanted to point out, there's obviously a very heavy emphasis on God and God guiding you and you kind of working within his plan and a lot of that stuff. And you have a little disclaimer, a little special note, a few pages in, and you say, taking a slight pause for you, maybe the word God doesn't sit well with you, brings up hurts and pains from your past. Maybe the word God brings you comfort and healing, unsure of whom you are, where you are with God. I just ask that as I walk you through my story, think about where your foundation is right now. And it was a really perfectly timed intervention, so to speak, because, I have a very deep background as someone who was raised Orthodox Jewish. So I feel like I have looked at a lot of other faiths as the cousins I never met when I was little, right?
Yeah.
Like I would be like, oh, that's familiar. I get that. Oh, I can relate to that, but it's a different construct. And I think that sometimes it's a little hard to relate, although I can relate. And I think people reading it, whether they are affiliated with whether they're people of faith, whether they're people who are, wondering or wandering, whatever it may be, I think they'll really respond to your tone and the way that you kind of broach some of these issues thus far in the book. And then on a lighter note, there's something where you had drawn a diagram. I think
Yeah.
I can get it in front of the
I
camera.
see it. I see it. Yeah. I'm familiar with that diagram.
You had drawn a diagram in the chapel in prison, and we'll get into all of that. And it was something that God kind of downloaded to you. But one of the parts of the vision of Lifted from the Rut, which we'll also talk about, is comedy nights. One of the what you might have mentioned this to me in a previous comment. Where did comedy nights come in
Yeah.
that?
Well, I mean, addiction's hard in general, right? So if we can't kind of laugh at our addiction, if I can't laugh at my addiction, then it's just holding too much over me. So I feel like comedy nights, the arts are unique ways to bring people in that have a way to kind of blend tragedy but also triumph together. And I think comedy is a great way to do that.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said, and certainly true in my life because, while I did comedy professionally, and I always thought that kind of maybe that was the path, the professional comedy path, I didn't realize how much I got out of it, how much I needed it, how much it afforded me kind of a way in to the truth, which is where truth tastes funny comes from, in that, you know, the things that we kind of stumble on, in life that make no sense, don't we can't make heads or tails of it. We gotta laugh at some of it. Um, but take us back a little bit. You know, you you and also another disclaimer. Some of this is about obviously alcoholism, some addiction, things like that. But I also ask the audience, wherever you are in this journey of life, that you kind of soak up the atmosphere of Rob's story, because it isn't one you've heard before. It isn't one that you've heard before. But take us back to your childhood, and when you had that first experience with drinking, because I didn't have it, but I totally related to what your childhood was like. So share.
Sure, yeah. You know, it was really funny. We just celebrated my wife's 50th birthday, and people are coming over to the party now in today's day. Like, hey, Rob, do you mind if I bring beer over? Because I know you don't drink. I'm like, that's my problem. That's not, that's not your thing. So as a kid, and I say that because I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, right? And a lot of their high
Yeah.
school kids, friends come over. But, as a kid, I just felt like alcohol was one of the social norms and it looked attractive. It's just there was no tragedy, there was no beating, punching, cussing. It was just like alcohol was the social thing that was around most parties I saw as a kid. So I mean, naturally I was just attracted to it and curious as most kids would be.
Yeah. And you also found in it kind of a little courage, right?
Oh yeah, liquid courage was the thing because I remember. I mean, 14 years old was when I guess I had my first drunk, if you will. And I remember I was hanging out at this youth event, and a kid came with a 6 pack of beer, and for whatever reason, he goes, "Hey Lohman, you want to have a couple beers?" And I was thinking, two girls, a 6 pack of beer, let's go. And so we walked through the little bushes in the backyard of this person's house. And I just remember her just going, "Kch, kch, kch," and just cracking three of them and just gulping them down. And it was that moment where I feel like alcohol had me at hello, or it had
Yeah.
me at kch. And that was like the next 15 years. It was attractive, but also I was a goofy kid, and I just was always trying to like fit in. And so that was one of those things that I felt like maybe helped me fit in and be part of the cooler crowd, or that's just kind of what we did. And so that's what I did for like the next decade and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. And being someone who was goofy, or in my case, I was small, so I used humor. But when I got into the workforce, and that's where there was alcohol in college, but I don't think that did its thing for me in college. I think what happened was in the workforce, in the work world, where you constantly have to, number one, shine among your peers, among other people, right? You're in bars a lot, you're at dinners, you're in social situations. You're supposed to move yourself up, which means you can't really be afraid to socialize or be afraid uh, to to be the life of the party you kind of want to be. And I think that drinking at that time was just really helpful for me in terms of being funny, right? Be doing my voices, doing characters, things like that. When you started working, what was the atmosphere like for you, and how did it play a role in your life?
Oh, that was it. From a core of like a serial entrepreneur that always likes to try new things and wasn't like the best employee. The way I compensated for that was to be the funny employee that people were attracted to. It was like, oh, good, Lohman's going to be here at this kind of event and things. But here's what I found out even now, even just getting into the field when doing interventions and sitting down with, grown childish adults, that have successful businesses. It's like,
Yeah,
well, I'm a functioning alcoholic. I've got it all together, and that kind of oxymoron in a sense. Um, what I have found is that most people don't want to be drinking at those things. They just doing it because everyone else is doing it. And so I throw
yeah,
these challenges
yeah,
out. I was like, okay, well, the next work party you have, make it a non-alcoholic work party, and just see what happens. And some people were relieved, and then just, those that had to have the tie on, they just didn't come. But I found most working adults only do it for what you just said. They have to entertain, they have to, the societal have tos. But when we can settle into being comfortable with who we are ourselves, we will attract those other people that say, dude, I don't even want to go. I'm so sick and tired of those parties. I'm sick of feeling hungover. I'm sick of being fearing. So, but yeah, I mean, I was the guy that just dove in, head over heels, like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to Vegas and try sake. Cool, that sounds like a
right.
good idea. And so I was all in during that time because that's just the chameleon like lifestyle I was living.
Yeah. Yeah, but you hit the nail on the head with when we can be comfortable with ourselves. Because I'm finding the more comfortable I am with myself, the less I or any of the people, because what happens is as you become more comfortable with yourself, you start associating with different people, mostly people who are also comfortable with themselves. That tends to be the case. They're not looking for reassurance, and we're not looking to, be reassuring ourselves or get reassurance. So we're functioning in a little bit different. We're playing a little bit of a different game, and what I've found, and I drink, very rarely now, but I used to drink quite a bit in especially in work situations. I didn't drink in social situations. I was one of those people who didn't like on New Year's and holidays and stuff. I didn't drink because it was like I didn't really well. I didn't feel it wasn't I didn't need it at
Right,
all in
right.
the work world where I was at parties and being a publicist and a social person and all that. That's where I preferred to drink.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you hit on is if we're uncomfortable with ourselves, I'll bet you come across a lot of people who are not loving what they're doing for work. And that can maybe because I have experienced it or at least seen it where people who that office party or that thing is like it's compensating for the fact that people aren't really loving what they're doing. That's not across the board, but do you see some of that?
For sure. I mean, you think about if your work life isn't satisfying, your home life isn't satisfying, you're not be able to keep up with the neighbors and the Joneses and all that kind of stuff. You're just trying to seek fulfillment somewhere. Even social media is that big pull, right? The fake media of just kind of like, oh, here's my life, but behind the scenes are these things. So yeah, if those things aren't fulfilling, it can definitely lead to that. And you find most people that are drinking or drugging or, having affairs or gambling like crazy. I mean, they're obviously not satisfied because they're seeking all that stuff externally. But when you can find that passion for, like I said, what you do, right? You're obviously passionate about what you do.
Yeah,
And, and I'm passionate about what I do. And so I don't find it like work. It's just kind of fun and enjoyable. But if you're miserable in other places, I mean, why not go get drunk? Why not gamble? Why
right.
not do all those things we don't want to do? But it gets that dopamine kind of hit or that feeling of acceptance from other people. And I mean, that's a real fake feeling that people have.
Yeah. Yeah. And as people come to it from all kinds of reasons, you were I don't know how old you were when you kind of hit that point where you needed to stop, but that's an interesting story. Share a little bit about what your life was like at that time.
Yeah, well, just imagine drinking from 14 to 29 and always trying to fit in everywhere. I mean, how lost would you be? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I can act different at the work party, or I can act different at, at an in-laws reception or just something. You're just, playing that game. I call it the Discover commercial syndrome. If you
Yeah.
ever seen the Discover commercials where they mimic the person on the other end, um, and it was just, I mean, it was sad. I had a lot of friends, but it just felt lonely. I
Yeah.
had,
What were you doing work wise?
so at the time, at the end of my drinking career, I was in commercial real estate.
Uh-huh.
And so I'd done a different couple of things along the way, but I was working for my uncle in Indiana and doing 5 state region of, shopping center leasing and just commercial real estate stuff. And for about 6 months before I found my recovery journey, I was dealing a lot with suicide ideation. So I'm
Oh,
sure people listening now and in other shows are like paying attention to what they're hearing, but it's like, yeah, that's just not me. I'm not a good person. I do this. I am not that. I do this. And so we're kind of living this life that is not in connection with our values and beliefs. And that was totally me. I mean, I would shut the bars down in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and drive to Michigan City up near Chicago, towards Chicago. It's a 2.5 hour drive. And it'd be 8, 9, 10 hour blackouts. And I would come home the next day with poker chips in my pocket, Hirsch, but I would have no clue I even like went to the casino. Like that's
wow.
how bad it was, right?
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
talk about like what happened in those blackouts or even just times you remember and you had shame. I would have shame and guilt around things I'd done, was not in conjunction with my Christian values I was born with and always believed that God was keeping me alive for a bigger purpose, but I was not living in congruency with that. So towards the end, again, I was dealing a lot with suicide ideation or intrusive thoughts, and would just see these moments where I would like hurt myself, but I wasn't hurting myself. But I'd be driving down the highway in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I'd see my car veer off the highway, hit a median, and just explode, and I'd see myself dead on the side of the road.
Oh, wow.
I'm still driving straight, going, whatever the
But you're
speed limit is.
you're literally
Yeah,
visualizing a scenario.
yeah.
But was that coming from, were you feeling like, were you in touch with some deep sadness
Oh
or
yeah.
some, like,
I,
what was your, if you took the drinking out of it and considered that maybe a, symptom, or the tool you were using,
yeah.
what was making you deeply sad or empty?
Well, I know I had a lot of shame in the way my lifestyle was at the time, for sure. Um,
Okay.
so there was definitely shame, there was guilt, there was depression, there was a lot of things going on, and a lot of it was because I just felt lost and just did not feel connected to who I was. And so, to answer your question a few minutes ago, like what led up to the night, right, that things happened, and so I started. I was definitely going inward. I mean, my friends kind of even noticed a little bit too, because I'm usually your go lucky. Let's call Lohman and go play pool and go dancing and have a fun time. But in tandem with that, I was just feeling like that guy we just talked about, terrible, horrible,
Yeah.
shameful. And one night I was hanging out in a bar in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it was music and girls and just the environment I went in, 8 nights a week. And all of a sudden, the bar gets completely dead silent, and I audibly hear the words, "You're done." And then the bar gets really loud again. And so I look around
Wow.
the bar and I just am thinking, I think I'm the only one that actually happened to. And so I told my friend Sean, I'm going home. I think I'm finally done drinking. And he
Yeah.
laughs like a good drinking buddy. And because I'd never said that before, I never said I'm
Mm-hmm.
done drinking because I wasn't done. I knew I wasn't done.
Yeah.
But this night, something shifted. And when I drove home that night, I literally felt like Jesus was sitting in the passenger seat with me, holding the steering wheel, and I'm like driving the car home, right? And just gets me home safely. And I don't know what's going on in my head, but I just something was different. And the next thing I know, I had walked up 12 steps to my 1 bedroom loft and ended up putting 350 pounds on my barbell on my little weight set there. Picked up the barbell, unhinged my elbows, and that was going to be the end of Rob. Just
Now
took myself
that,
out.
when I read that part in the book, and I didn't pick up on the fact that it was 12 steps that you
I
that you
know.
went up to your apartment. But the barbell thing is Like I've never heard that or seen that in a movie, that someone would just think of that, or because that would just be horrible,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
That would be a
Well,
horrible way to go. Uh, Death by barbell, but it would be like, but so what? I mean, what happened? That's 350 pounds.
yeah. And I could not lift that much weight, just to
Yeah,
let people know. But what I believe happened that night was, as I unhinged my elbows, I believe God literally stopped time in my apartment and
yeah,
kind of looked at my dog Jake and said, "Go save your dad's life." I had a yellow Labrador at the time, and my dog Jake comes over and starts nudging my knee with his head, kind of like dogs do with that head tilt. Like, what are you
yeah,
doing? And I'm looking at him like, "Holy crap, who's going to feed you tomorrow?" Now, obviously, this is like milliseconds of time, right? But
yeah,
I just remember looking at him in his eyes and just like, "Who's going to feed you tomorrow?" And I'm like, what about my parents? And like, what's going on? What's happening? Right. And God, my God, carries the weight of the world. And I believe he just put that barbell back on the rack and revealed himself to me through my dog, which is, God spelled backwards, his dog.
right.
And, and I just think of that time. And that was the first time I mean, I felt, I don't know why I'm saying literally so much right now, but I felt completely like a different person.
Yeah,
And I slept in peace that night and woke up the next morning. And, I meant to call my Aunt Carol, who'd been sober 24 years, and ended up calling my parents. And that was the answered prayer. So don't ever quit praying for your loved ones. But that was the answered prayer that my mom and dad had been asking was, God, just save our son. Because I wasn't like your down and out drunk and like, everything externally, you couldn't tell how dark I was inside.
yeah,
But that was the turning point for me. It was the guy that entertain people on golf or sales meetings, drinking a couple cases of beer a day or a couple bottles of scotch or whatever. And I just functioned
yeah.
and my life changed.
Now, how did your parents? What? How much of what you were going through did they know? Because they were praying for you. They felt that something was wrong. So while you were functional in a regular way, um, what was their perception of where you were at?
Oh, just a decade of history. I mean, I was just wild
Yeah.
and, I'd be, have those nights where it would just be blackout or throw up or, just incidences. And so, but just as they lived in Texas and I was in Indiana and they'd see me, like often, right? They just could tell as a parental instinct that things were off because I would never be drunk around them.
Hmm.
I would drink because that's just kind of, and my parents weren't alcoholics. Like I didn't have this like
Right.
parental thing where it's like, oh yeah, they're drunks. He became a drunk. Like that was not my mom and dad.
Yeah.
But we have lots of relatives and friends and family that drank a lot. So there were concerns about a lot of people in our family and stuff, but it was just, my mom could just pick up on it. The heart, the excitement in my life started getting drained out a little bit. And, yes, they just knew.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that idea of, don't stop praying, because that message is to both people, is like to the family, don't give up, but also to the person who's suffering with it, is like, don't forget that people are praying for you.
Yeah.
People are waiting for you to just hear that voice, you know, have that revelation. And I've interviewed people on this show who have had similar stories of interventions, like a kind of a spiritual or godly intervention, um, and it it's always someone, it seems to me, who has gone on and done something real, has chosen a very meaningful and not always easy path as a result, which means that however you want to interpret it, however someone listening wants to interpret that experience or those experiences, um, the result is that, number one, you survived. Number two, you made it your business to be proud of the path you're choosing and of the work you've done. But your story doesn't stop there. Your story just begins there. So I want you to continue a little bit about the twists and turns.
Yeah, it does. And along the way, there's a phrase I came up with. It was just kind of whenever I put potential and alcohol in the same room, potential just won so many times in my life. And so I'm sure there's people also listening that they've had those dreams, those moments, they're getting close, they self-sabotage it for whatever reason, and things are just getting good. And a lot of times, we're driven by the subconscious of what's going on through trauma or life situations. They're just driving our behaviors. So earlier you talked about foundations. And so whatever your belief is, right, whether it's God or whatever you believe in, right, if that foundation is not strong, then it's not going to last. And so for me, getting sober and going through AA and all the steps and having a sponsor and just really changed my life, and I was just instantly like happy. So for what I do now with addiction interventions and help people get to detox and rehab and all those things, and you hear their cycles of, man, I've been to detox 18 times. I've just been to rehabs, and so mine was just gone from the substance abuse part,
Mhm.
but the gambling and the impulsivity in my life continued. And now just I was 8 months ago or so, I was meeting with a therapist and she asked me if I would consider the fact that maybe I have ADHD. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, I wouldn't doubt it based on what I know about it. And now that I've learned a lot about it and I look at my behaviors in my life, and it's actually given me a lot of understanding about Robbie as a kid, Rob as an adult, drunk Robbie, and Rob sober. And so understanding my makeup now and seeking dopamine and excitement and things in my life. And when I'm hyper focused on something, it just things are clicking. And when I'm not, nothing's moving, nothing's happening. And so learning how to not control that, but just be aware of myself now is great. And so when I learned about this and I look at what we're going to talk about, is there was a lot of sadness of just like, man, if I would have known this back then, but then you're playing God, right? If I would have known this back then, things would have gone differently. I don't know
Yeah.
that. But now that I do know it, what can I do to continue to use this superpower of ADHD in my brain and stuff to help people in a crazy awesome way what I'm doing now? So it's life's just continual discovery, right? I mean, like, learning about the truth about ourselves, the truth will set us free, as we say in my faith. But it's the more I know about me, the more I can operate well. So the next period of my life, when I found sobriety, I was single. And down the road in 2006, I meet my wife. And then, so now I'm married, right? And then I have my son's born in 2007. Now I'm a father, right? And I started, I step into another career path in 2008. My daughter's born in 2010. So there's all these new things.
Right. Right.
And and I can look back on it now, I can just realize I was very emotionally immature in my early sobriety, because when you start drinking, drugging, and or doing porn and having sex and things, like the frontal lobe of our brains isn't even fully functioning yet. So I'm learning how to not control my impulsivity.
Uh huh.
And so my gambling, my risk taking, my, you know, not in a mental illness way, but like my disconnect from what's going on around me because I'm so focused on other things was definitely not an asset in my marriage and being an early father. And so a lot of those negative feelings about myself started coming back over time because I got so busy in my life, Hirsch, that I quit going to recovery meetings. I quit going to Bible studies. I quit going to men's groups because I was just trying to grow a business and save a business. And now I got to be this big thing and be this big success. And I was just failing left and right. But I didn't want anyone to know that. So I would just put the face on. And then inside, I was starting to struggle again with the suicidation, the self hatred, the shame, and the guilt, just like it was before I got sober, before I had my mental breakdown. It was very similar things going on in my life. And most of that was because I was just checking out from self awareness.
Yeah. And no drinking at that
No drinking, no.
point.
Like I literally had my last drink and drug was June 8th, 2001.
Wow.
So this is all mental health stuff. This is all like brain chemistry and everything going on up here without the substances.
Yeah. Do you think you were at that time addicted, quote unquote, to anything, like to any behaviors
Well,
or
gambling was one. It was
yeah.
scratch tickets. It was going to the casinos. When I'd argue with my wife and stuff, I'm like, well, screw that. I'm gonna check out. I'm gonna go up here and just, like escape, right? Escapism was one of my things, right?
Yeah.
Escapism and
Sure.
avoidance as well, because again, I saw I stepped into being a captive insurance agent with an agency, and you're there just to build this thing, this dream of being this massive producer and just setting your family up for success and just running to a point where you weren't running in the right directions. You were just busy, but you weren't
Hmm.
growing your business in an effective way. And so then those things start sinking in a little bit more too. And it's just, well, I'll go buy a whole book of scratch tickets and sit in my office and just
Yeah.
hopefully I hit that thing. But people with gambling addictions, if you've ever had anyone on your show, a lot of us, we don't actually care about the win. We get more excited about the planning, the moving things around, the manipulating certain situations to get to the point where we can actually get to the casino.
Uh-huh.
And it's
Well,
a
that makes
weird,
sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that
it's
makes
a weird
sense.
deal.
It's if you think about it, it's kind of like a ritual.
Yeah,
It's very ritualistic. I think about the days when I was drinking a lot, and it was the hardest thing to. Fortunately, I kind of my lifestyle and everything changed. My geography changed, and like so, kind of a lot of that took care of itself because I wasn't in the same town with the same rituals and the same crowd and all that stuff. People I love, people I still love, but it was the ritual of how this stuff unfolds. So I can see where the planning, the moving things around, the process, the environment, the and then therein that possibility,
yeah,
the FOMO, or the idea that whatever it is, you're in an area of complete what seems like complete possibility. Um, so okay, so so you were struggling with that. So what happened at that point?
yeah. Well, you mentioned the keyword process. What I'm talking about right now is a process addiction. I don't
Yeah,
need to put anything in my body. It's just the chemical makeup of what's really kind of happening. And a lot of it deals with kind of this dopamine depletion. You're seeking excitement to get that dopamine part. So in some ways, your brain's kind of working in the right capacity, right? Because for
yeah,
guys like me, people can drink a cup of coffee and they'll be up all night. I mean, for other people, for me, I could drink coffee and go right to bed, right? So
mm-hmm.
there's this whole different way that certain things affect us. So for me, just as we kind of get to where I'm going is, again, I was doing a lot with suicide ideation again in 2011, and so many attacks in my marriage and in my business. It was just I was overwhelmed, and I got to a point where I'd get so overwhelmed. And this is interesting. Be on your show, I'll share about why this is interesting. But like, I would get to a point where I would just be so paralyzed by paperwork and things I didn't know what to do next. Then one day I was sitting in my office and I took my fist and I hit myself in the side of the head. And like this, literally, I saw a flash of light like in my brain. And I was like, oh, and I just got back to work. I'm like, oh, I got a big hit from like a big dopamine hit.
Yeah,
And I never told anyone that either. But a few years ago, I was on a podcast show about men and anxiety and just like being frozen in a sense. And there's six of us on this show, tall talking. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to share this because I've never shared this with anybody on the show or show. But I shared that instance. And I said, and
yeah.
four of the other guys, there were six of us, they all said, dude, I punched myself in the head and I get the same rush, the same
Wow.
movement to go forward more. And I'm sitting there, I started crying on the show. I'm like, I've never felt, not in a sense validated, but in a sense like not weird by sharing that.
Yeah. Well,
And
I'm
it was
glad you're
great.
sharing it here because I think that's part of it too. The keeping things to yourself, the secret, you know, vulnerability that we're afraid to share.
Yeah, especially as entrepreneurs and stuff, we're trying to make things happen. We got to look a certain way. We don't want people to think we're kind of off. And by sharing things like this, I actually, in some weird ways, I attract more people because it's like, oh, you're
Yeah.
raw and you're real. And I don't do it for that. This is just my story. But it's to say, hey guys, like I've never created one new emotion since I was born. Neither of you, right? We all deal with the same stuff in different ways. And the better our spiritual conditioning is, the less likely those things are going to throw us off kilter. So as you talked earlier about a foundation, I used to always think my faith was really strong. And in scripture, it talks about when we scatter our seeds amongst the rocks, the wheat, we're going to have very, very shallow roots. So when the storms of life come, we get washed away. But if I can spread my seeds in fertile soil and I can grow them deeper, when those storms come, I will not get washed away. I will stand strong because of my faith. And my roots were shallow at this time of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I lost my agency in November of 2011 just due to sales and production numbers. And when I can look back on that, there was definitely some self-sabotage happening in my life and just not being focused and just whatever I struggled with. But I was in a dark, desperate place. And then fast forward to February the next year in 2012, I was up late with my family. My kids were 2 and 4 at the time. And, just my wife and I were in a rocky place as well. And, we were in debt and all these things from losing my business. And, all that was, I say, tucked away in the basement of my brain, right?
Yeah.
The fear, the shame, all those things. And we watched a movie this day. If anyone ever seen the movie 7 Days in Utopia, it's a great golf movie. It's all about failure and success and redemption, right, in your life, and you get your stuff back together and things are good. Well, we watched that movie that night. Really good movie, but when you're in a dark place, all I related to was the negative stuff in the movie, the
Yeah.
fear, the
Yeah.
shame, all that. I didn't We were like, oh wow, the guy turned his life around. And so my wife went to bed and I stayed up late that night. And just as I was on my computer, looking for a job and working on a network marketing side hustle we always had, um, I just got up and started organizing our townhouse because it was in complete disarray and there was boxes everywhere. And I don't do well with clutter. I don't know how
Yeah.
you do with clutter, Hirsch,
Not
but
not particularly well.
yeah, it sets you off. But when you don't know how much that impacts you in a negative way, you don't know.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I know in my life today, but then I just got up and there was stuff everywhere. And next thing I knew, had lit some boxes on fire on our covered patio.
Right.
And when I go back to the night that I got sober, like I didn't plan on putting a bunch of weight on a barbell. This night I didn't plan on lighting my porch on fire. It was
Yeah.
just one of those things that happened. And as hard as it is to really unravel that, even still today, that's just where I was at that time. And so in a mental blackout, I ended up lighting some boxes on fire on our covered patio. And I couldn't stop it. And the fire spread. And fortunately, everybody in my house, we got everybody out, called the fire department. All my neighbors got out, like nobody got hurt. But
Yeah.
there was a lot of
Wow.
property damage in a townhouse row, and it was scary as heck. At 2:30 in the morning, you're walking out of your townhouse, and there's snow on the ground, and you're got your 2 and 4 year old and your dog and your elderly neighbor, and just like people out, and it looked like a war zone, and it was horrible. It was probably definitely one of the scariest moments in my entire life of like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
And that was my mental breakdown in my life, and obviously a major turning point in my life too. But it was scary, and I had to jump into protection mode to protect my family because I knew I was going away, and it was just all out. It could have been much worse, and it was extremely horrible in a gazillion ways for my neighbors, my community, and my family and myself. And then began the journey of confession and prison and just the learning how to navigate the prison waters and marriage and how do we get through this together, and just a whirlwind of things happened.
Was there any doubt at all about your culpability in this? Was like, how did that, like sometimes our instinct might be to say, oh, I don't know how it happened, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, like how did you, what went on inside you at that moment?
Well, the only explanation could have been me.
Yeah.
There wasn't like a this is exactly how it happened moment, but there wasn't that thing of
Yeah.
like, oh gosh, who did this? And so for
Right.
me, I had to just cover it up. Like the addict mind kicks in, like, okay, I got to cover this up,
Yeah.
and not to get away with it in a sense, but I got to figure out how to like really protect my wife and kids because like we just lost pretty much everything, and this is bad. And so I lied about it for the next couple weeks for sure because I'm just trying to figure out what do I do? I can't tell
Mm-hmm.
the truth because I'll
Mm-hmm.
go to prison. I can't tell my wife because she'll leave me. It's like I like how do I work this? And
Yeah.
so over time, it ended up to the point where everything lined up in the proper way to just tell my wife that it was the moment I was staying at my mother-in-law's house. She lives down the street, not too far from here, where we live now, which is not too far from where I'm talking about this incident happened. But I remember I was walking in the office there. I'm like, all right, God, I either have to lie about this the rest of my life or just got to figure out, like, or I got to tell the truth, and just kind
Yeah.
of almost what I was saying to him is what my wife said to me right when I walked out of the office.
Right.
And I just remember opening my mouth and it was just like, it wasn't even really words. It was just a wailing of finally I can tell her, and
Yeah.
she was trying to figure out, like, did he do this? Like, did he do it? Like, I wouldn't be
Sure.
surprised if he did, not because he did stuff like that, but there were a lot of things going on in our life that were just desperation. And so that happened. And then over the course of time with an attorney and talking to investigators, I ended up confessing to what happened. And meanwhile, my wife's having to figure out, do I stay with this guy?
Yeah.
Like, is he crazy? What happened? And so through her own conversations with God, and she decided to stay with me, and we have worked through the prison experience and post-prison experience and restitution, and there's still remnants from that for sure.
Yeah.
Of, but now that I have more of a check on my impulsivity and a check on who I am, and I have great men in my life that I trust, and we speak life into each other, and when I'm feel like I'm maybe not operating in my full sense of authenticity, I'm called out on it. And so there's all that happens, throughout my life. But thank goodness for strong community and people that loved us well through that tough season of our life.
Yeah. And and now let share a little bit about your work and what you're doing and how you're helping people who are going through all manner of addiction.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to tell people is if you have a felony on your record, it's not the end of the world. Just going to say that
Yeah.
out loud because sometimes people with felonies on their records can say, well, I'm never going to get a good job. I'm never going to be able to do this. It's like, yeah, it was a major blip in my life for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And now having F's on my report cards after I got out of the halfway house, it was that thing of, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I try to get these good sales jobs to take care of my family, but they just weren't lining up with background checks and stuff. And so through just a lot of prayer and everything, I'm like, all right, God, what do I do? What pathway am I supposed to go down? Because the diagram you showed in my book is what I wrote when I was in prison.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just so people know, I mean, I was looking at 2 years of work release to 56 years in prison. God got me out in 10 and a half months. A lot of amazing miracles happened. But that diagram is what I wrote when I was away, and that's what's happening now in my life of how do I go help people now?
Mm-hmm.
And so after I got, moved back home, a friend of mine said, hey, Lohman, you should get trained to do addiction interventions and become a recovery coach because you know good recovery and you obviously know bad recovery and what comes with both of those.
Yeah.
So I can speak into people's lives in an authentic way. And so 2 weeks later, a gal did a training in Colorado with addiction interventions, and I just put the entrepreneur hat on and said, let's go. And so I got trained in November of 2015, launched my business in January 1st, 2016. And it's just been this up and down journey of like growing a business like this. And who do you partner with? Who do you network with? What do you do? Do things wrong, do things right, and just continuing to stay on the mission. And that mission has changed. The mission's been the same to help people
Yeah.
like find freedom, but the avenues have changed along the way. And so earlier you mentioned christianrehabservices.com. That's our whole new website. We're opening up a outpatient program here in Colorado to help people, and it's a one of a kind deal. And we're just here to help people. Now, again, people may not want this, and that's fine because I have connections all over the country. But if they
Mm-hmm.
want Christian focused outpatient programming, that's what we offer now. And we do that through we're doing that. The build out is actually supposed to be completed in 3 days. So it's like fresh at our new space and the team's being put together. But through that, we want to help as many people as we can. So we have a We have a
Yeah.
foundation that we can help people through. And then we also have our clinical side of our for-profit business we can do, but we're trying to work in tandem to help as many as we can for those that are seeking this type of help.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And, one of the things that lingers with me about your story is that, you know, it's tough to become the person we want to be. And I can't stress that enough, like from my own experience. To be 58 years old and feel like, you know, the last 5 years I've had the most personal growth of my entire life. So, probably some of it had to do with COVID, some of it had to do with the trajectory and just the time where you couldn't do anything and who knows what. But my point is that you might as well dive in and work on yourself because it's a chore, it's a job, and there's I don't know that there's any wrong way to do it, but I know that introspection, digging in, all the things that are holding you back uh, are only going to be helped by better awareness and maturity. Do you feel now? I mean, having gone through the road that you've gone, how do you feel now about your emotional maturity, about uh, your stability in within yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I'm on solid foundation for sure. I know who
Yeah.
I am really well, and because I want to be prepared for, there will be storms going forward, and being prepared for that is really related to my grounding in my own life. And so I really, really do focus on that. And when I don't, I mean, 2 years ago, I had an injury that had a bunch of nerve damage and all this stuff that really set me back in a lot of momentum in my life. And that was really hard, Hirsch.
Mm-hmm.
That was tough because I'm like, man, I was just, the road was going this way and it's still there. But just when you can't sleep and you have nerve damage and stuff, it was really hard. So I had to even strengthen my faith a lot during that. It's like, what's the point of this one, God? I
Yeah.
thought we were on this good pathway. Like here we were going, and now bam, here's this injury, and it completely set me back. Where I quit podcasting, I quit speaking. I couldn't stand in front of audience. I just couldn't do it physically, And then it was just this woe is me for a while.
Yeah.
But those woe is me's don't last as long. Before they would
Yeah.
last periods of time. Now when they come, it's like, all right, whatever, it's a setback, move forward. And and I feel like that's why what we're working on now in opening is found so much momentum so quickly because I found a niche, we found a need. We're not like everybody else. This is if people want this, they're going to get it, and we find them, and they find us. And but when I can walk into a house doing an addiction intervention, and I show up to the door, and it's like and I mean, the world is wild for addiction interventions, and people don't know what those are like, and
Right.
it's crazy. But when I walk into someone's house and they're like, "Who the f are you?" Like, what are you doing in my house? Like, da 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 da. I'm like, well, if you really want to know, let me just give you a quick 2 minute version of me, and I'll spit out what you and I just talked about in the last 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, okay, maybe I'll listen to you for a little bit longer because
Right.
you've been through some crap, man." And
Right.
that's what I want people to see from me is just authenticity, vulnerability, and I definitely don't do things right all the time by any means whatsoever. But again, if I have more humility to own up to my error and ways than I used to.
Well, Rob, I really appreciate your coming on the show, sharing this stuff. The books. I'm excited to finish reading this book, and then you sent me two books. What is the other book that you sent?
The other one's 101 Reasons to Quit Getting Drunk During the Holidays.
Right, and if you see the cover, it has to keep getting drunk during the holidays, but the word keep is cut out, is crossed out. But that's got to be a good one. Uh,
Yeah.
um, you know,
Well, it's funny, depending on who you are. If you're the alcoholic that looks at it and reads it, and you flip through the book because most of it's blank, you're
yeah,
like, oh, there's no reasons to quit drinking, and they throw it down. But if you're on the other side and you want to quit, I mean, I can tell you why to quit drinking. And
right,
you already know that. This is your
yeah,
journey to figure out why you should. And so, yeah, it was a fun, quick book to write for the holidays a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I'm gonna get a bunch of copies and just send them out to people. People love that. People love to be preached to. That's like when you do that addiction intervention and you have to tell them your story, so they're like, okay, I
Yeah.
get it. I get what this guy's been through. He's not coming from a place of judgment. He's coming from a place of experience.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, man. And then if you'll just leave us with one thought for, people are always trying to find ways to thrive and survive. The world, as you pointed out, throws curveball after curveball. We literally don't know. Maybe just a word about handling some of those curveballs that life throws you.
Yeah, well, the good thing is you're not defined by your past. You're only being shaped into the person that you're becoming. So if you want to be defined by your past, that's up to you. But there's freedom. God doesn't make junk. You're going forward, and just kind of cut the cord and just move forward. Don't let the past hold you back.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.